How do you break a habit? You drop it. That was a joke. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming for the talk this evening. And Dennis did introduce me, but I think I need to tell you a few more things about myself. It's quite important because it will put things in perspective. There's some people going out, some people coming in, so we'll wait for a while. I have been a practicing Buddhist for more than 20 years. I meditate daily, I read the suttas, and I have attended several meditation retreats and been a volunteer for various not-for-profits for several years. I have always understood the value of the Dharma, and I've always been passionate about sharing the Dharma. So it's important for me to introduce myself to you as it would contextualize where I'm coming from and why I am sharing my journey through grief and loss with you. The Triple Gem, meaning the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, was my refuge at my most painful time in my life. At some point of time in our lives, we will all experience a life-changing moment, a life-changing loss, and that can come in many forms. It could be a terminal illness, it could be the death of a loved one, or even our own death. That is when we are forced to question our very existence. As Buddhists, this is the time to turn to the Triple Gem, to the Buddha as the best physician, the Dharma as the best medicine, and the Sangha as mentors. My life as I knew it ended 2 years ago when I found my 30-year-old son, for no apparent reason, just dead on his bed on an otherwise ordinary Monday morning. No illness, no explanations, no goodbyes, just dead on his bed. Imagine on a normal Monday morning, you walk into your child's room and you find him or her dead on the bed. How do you think you'd react? The death of a child at whatever age is one of the most tragic loss that any parent can experience, especially if that death is sudden and unexpected. When it happened to me, it felt like part of my body had been cruelly torn off. In schools, in universities, we are not taught coping skills of how to deal with death, especially the death of a child. It is against the expected norm for a child to die before their parent. So for most people, even thinking of the possibility that a child can die before the parent brings chills, brings so much fear and anxiety that we are afraid to hear the hard truths of life. I was the same before my child died. So like everyone else, I was not prepared to even think that my child could die before me. But life gives us no choice as to who dies first. The reality is that children can die before their parents. It happens every day in every country, no matter what religion, no matter what cultural background. Yesterday, September 10, was Are You OK Day? A time we think about people having a tough time with anxiety and depression and suicide. Today, September 11, anniversary of the Twin Tower. So many young people died at that time. So it's not an uncommon thought that young people can die. People die every day. So how do we deal and how do we heal from the pain and trauma of grief when we encounter the death of someone close to us? I was exposed to the triple gem long before my son died, so I think I reacted in a fairly calm and mindful way when my son died. At that moment, of course, I did not know, but after much reflection and contemplation, and speaking with many bereaved mothers and fathers, sharing my experience, and much meditation, I now realize I was able to be relatively calm and mindful at the most traumatic time in my life because I was already exposed to the Dharma long before my son died. We should learn skills of mindfulness meditation, read the suttas, attend Dharma talks, and meditation retreats when we are well. It's like going to the gym to build muscles or taking vitamins when you are well. Don't expect to build muscles when you are unwell. So similarly, this applies to our spiritual journey, to our practice to cope with difficulties that life offers. Viktor Frankl, a survivor from a Nazi concentration camp, said, It is not what we expect from life, but what life expects from us. We have no control or choice as to what happens to us, but we have a choice as to how we respond. When we experience loss, we can choose to be the survivor or the victim of that same loss. Good things, neutral things, and terrible things will happen to us in our life. And the more prepared we are, the better we can cope in the most dire of situations. As Buddhists, our tool for coping is understanding the Four Noble Truths. When I found my son dead, I was even able to be mindful in delivering the devastating news to my husband and the rest of the family. I was mindful that the impact of such devastating news, if not delivered properly, can cause someone to have a heart attack. Even though I was broken inside, I was able to repeat like a mantra to my son, "May you be well and happy. May you have the best rebirth possible," until they wheeled him away. On hindsight, I can't possibly imagine how I had the presence of mind to do this. But of course, I know now it's because of my many years of being exposed to the Dharma. Most of us think of our own loss when someone we love dies. But just think about the person who dies. They have lost everything in everyone they love. At this most difficult time, as a mother, I felt it was my duty to ensure that he left us with as little sadness as possible. I had my time to break down and cry later, but now, and that is the morning I found him, I had to be mindful to think about my son's best rebirth. And that is what we're taught, our Buddhist practice is, the time of death is the most important time. After the funeral, it was worse for me. There are no words that can describe what sudden loss feels. And if any of you have experienced the death of a loved one, and if it was a sudden death, you can understand what I'm speaking about. It makes you lose confidence in everything, and especially if you're uncertain as to the cause of death. It took many months for the coroner to come back to confirm that it was the cause of death was a natural cause. My 30-year-old son died of a heart attack. It was due to a blocked artery. So all I could think of was, how? Why? What is the meaning of this? Why my son? When my son died, I was in so much pain, and to try to heal from the pain, I read voraciously, trying to find answers to end my pain. But I could not find a book from a Buddhist mother's perspective. There were Dharma books, and there were books written by bereavement books, but nothing from a Buddhist mother's perspective. So I felt almost duty-bound to write a book on how the Dharma can heal us from the most devastating pain, to understand suffering at its root, not to run away from the suffering, but to move towards right understanding. To move from the why me to the what now, and even to the why not me. The book is titled Opens Like a Flower, Cut It with a Knife, A Buddhist Mother's Journey Through Grief. Ironically, it was based on the song written by my son before he died. I came across this song when he died, and I thought that it was very apt to describe my journey, so I used that title. I hope that the book can help other Buddhist parents to understand their journey. I have shared this book with bereaved mothers, and one non-Buddhist mother whose only child died suddenly and unexpectedly told me that she was on the brink of ending it. But reading the book had given her some hope, and now she meditates daily. Another mother told me, I didn't know that Buddhism teaches so much. I didn't know that you could get so many pearls from Buddhism. The title, Opens Like a Flower, Cut It with a Knife. Often when people hear the title, they wonder, why cut it with a knife? It sounds a bit harsh and brutal. But life is harsh, and when we experience suffering in its harshest form, that is when we have the opportunity to move to right understanding, the first factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. But nobody can walk this path for us. We have to walk the path ourselves. So today, I will talk about the first noble truth of suffering, understanding the truth of suffering, and how our most difficult moments are our best teachers. For it's only when we encounter life-shattering moments that we can see things as they truly are, but only if we are willing to be awakened from the tragedy and pick ourselves up, realizing that we must make the effort to walk the path. And by the path, I mean the Noble Eightfold Path. When my son died, I felt conflicted. I thought I understood the teachings of the Buddha, that life is dukkha, attachment causes dukkha or suffering, that all conditioned things are subject to death. But yet, I was in so much pain. If I understood these teachings, why was I in so much pain? For many of us going through a traumatic loss, sleeping is difficult, eating is difficult. It's just incredibly painful. The stomach is perpetually in pain. I was shuddering in pain for months. My mind was in pain. And even though I have a loving husband, loving and caring husband, and loving and caring daughters, I felt alone in grief because grief cannot be shared. It's a very personal thing. And when we encounter any kind of loss or pain, we just want it to go away. We want somebody to actually literally pick us up and put us in another environment. No one can take the suffering away. We ourselves must make the effort. And some try to numb the pain with pills or diversions, but suffering that is not confronted is just postponed. It will resurface. When I look back, I understand that I was fortunate to have been a Dhamma practitioner, in that I was already exposed to the suttas. I had attended retreats and meditated regularly. I knew where to find the medicine of the Dharma when I most needed it. Had I not known mindfulness meditation at the time, I don't know where I would be now. I probably won't be speaking to you today. In the words of Ajahn Chah, theory and practice. The first knows the name of a medicinal plant, and the second goes to find it and uses it. So it's not enough to just have theoretical knowledge of the Dharma. We must be prepared to use it as medicine when we need it. The months following the death of my son, I had to have faith and confidence to use the Dharma as medicine for my grief. Healing is a long process and requires a lot of work. And there's a difference between healing from the pain and the trauma and getting over it. You never get over the death of your loved one. Why should you? But to have a meaningful life, we must heal. We must try to heal from the pain and grief. You know, in this cycle of samsara, we're going to go through a lot of pain and grief, life after life. So our journey is to learn how to heal from our trauma and our pain of grief. And if we are skillful, we can see this traumatic experience as our teacher. Healing starts with understanding suffering at its cause and moving towards rather than running away from suffering. And what is the noble truth of suffering? This is what the Buddha said. Now this, monks, is the noble truth of dukkha. Birth is dukkha. Aging is dukkha. Death is dukkha. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Association with the unbeloved is dukkha. Separation from the loved is dukkha. Not getting what we want is dukkha. In life, whilst we cannot escape physical pain, we can end psychological pain or suffering. And when we speak of suffering, we are referring to psychological suffering. And there are two types of suffering in this context. The first, which leads to more suffering, and the second, which leads to the end of suffering. And this is what Ajahn Chah said. The first is the pain of grasping after fleeting pleasures and aversion for the unpleasant, the continued struggle of most people day after day. The second is the suffering which comes when you allow yourself to feel fully the constant change of experience, pleasure, pain, joy, and anger. Pleasure, pain, joy, and anger, without fear or withdrawal. The suffering of our experience leads to inner fearlessness and peace. So the first suffering comes from ignorance, thinking that by feeding our desires we will be happy. It only brings short-term happiness, because we will be soon hoping for something else, and the fear of losing what we have gained. Greed, hatred, and delusion fuel our desires. We are delusional when we think that we will never be separated from our loved ones. Fear of separation from what we love causes pain. Hence, these fleeting sources of happiness from a Buddhist perspective may well and truly be called suffering and the seeds of suffering. The second type of suffering is when we move towards the cause rather than run away. So in the case of grief, it is when we move towards rather than resist it. And from a Buddhist point of view, this is the path to wisdom and liberation. And suffering can only end through the noble Eightfold Path, which begins with right understanding. Understanding impermanence, understanding we own nothing, not even our own bodies. And this understanding came to me when I actually saw my son dead on his bed. The room even had his scent, but his body was empty. It was like a hermit crab had just left the shell, or a tenant had just vacated the room. And through meditation, I realized that we are not our body. That body was not my son. He had left the body. And that is a very powerful teaching of impermanence. We own nothing. Everyone and everything we love will be separated from us whether we die first or not. And this is incredibly scary, and it can leave us bitter or make us a better person. Actually, when we realize this, it is an empowerment. It empowers us to appreciate all we have a lot more. We don't take things for granted. When you go to bed, you think that, when you wake up, things may not be the same. And that has been the teachings of the Buddha. Impermanence, anicca, anatta, dukkha.